So another Premier League season has come to an end, and what better thing to do than give out some end of season awards. Here to help me do so is Dan. Dan, what's happening, mate?
Easy now, easy now.
Good. So, end of season awards. Let's start off with best player. Obviously, it's Erling Haaland, but it'd be a pretty boring podcast if we just gave it to Haaland. So let's just rule Haaland out of the debate here. Who for you would you say, barring Haaland, goes down as the best player this Premier League season?
Martin Odegaard was mine. I had him and Saka like fairly close, to be fair. But I think Odegaard just came in and just smashed it. I didn't expect him to, because we had him on loan before the season before. But this season, completely different. Do you know what I'm saying? He was probably head and shoulders probably the closest to like Kevin De Bruyne in that sense. 23
goals and assists in 37 games.
Yeah.
Important goals as well. Popping up with important goals. Obviously, you know, recency bias. I think about that goal against Newcastle when he drilled it along the floor.
Yeah.
But a player that really, in my opinion, was the most vital to that Arsenal team. The only one you could say, maybe underrated in that Arsenal team, not underrated, but, you know, maybe Ramsdale. If Ramsdale hadn't have been there, that would have been a massive miss. The problem I sort of say with a shout for Saka, and listen, nothing to do with the penalty he missed against West Ham. That is what it is. Fucking these things happen. But the thing I would say with Saka is Saka a miss? Yes. Is he irreplaceable? Maybe over the course of a season, over the course of 10 games or something. But in a one-off match, Saka goes and Trossard comes in. You got Martinelli on the other side. I think you can deal with it. Jesus drops out wide. I think you can deal with it. Martin Odegaard goes. No one you can replace him with. Yeah. And that is why I would go Odegaard over Saka for best player.
No, I agree. I agree with that logic. I mean, because as you were saying it there, it's a creativity thing. I mean, obviously Saka's creative as well. Obviously most players, you play in that sort of final third of the pitch, you have to be creative to set something up or score a goal. But there's just something about Odegaard's brain, his football brain is just on it. He can see the pass, he can pick the pass. Dare I say it, the closest thing we've had to probably Dennis Bergkamp in a long time. Do you know what I mean? He can thread those balls through. He can score a goal. Do you know what I mean? I thought he might struggle. I thought he might struggle playing sort of like in that midfield, just with the physicality and the pace of the Premier League.
Players have often looked good on loan, and then failed to flatter in their second season. You look at, obviously, not that it was with the same club, but the likes of Jesse Lingard. Even if you look at players with the same club, you look at Coutinho last season when he came in on loan, looked on fire, and then second season doesn't look as good. So I can see where that sort of chain of thought might come from. Yeah,
it's kind of apprehensive. You kind of like, well, was that just a flash in the pan? It's a new experience for the player. It's, you know, it's just all nice, isn't it? Because he's going to go back to Real Madrid. But to be fair to the boys, he's come in and he's played his socks off, and he's become a firm fan's favourite. So
be very surprised, wouldn't you, if he dropped off next season?
I mean, he dropped off towards the end of last season in certain games, but that's expected. I mean,
everyone's human.
Yeah, but I mean, that team was virtually running on empty. Do you know what I mean? It was just like everyone was pretty much playing every week. All right, we didn't have all the other competitions, but still playing, you know, 30 odd Premier League games. That's a lot. You're not going to be like tip top in every single one of them. So what about best signing?
Best signing, I am going to, again, it's Haaland, isn't it? Like, it's obvious. But barring Haaland, I'm going to go Sven Botman, because there was a bit of a transfer saga over him. 35 mil, not a bad price. It's not a snip price, is it? But it's not a bad price, Sven Botman. And obviously, joint best defence in the Premier League with Man City. Looked like they would be best defence in the Premier League, but obviously shipped a few goals against Villa towards the end of the season and a few other matches and whatnot. And obviously, you know, City went on a 16-game unbeaten run or whatever. Yeah. Sven Botman, for me, was one that I would say definitely best signing. I'd be very interested from yourself to hear about worst signing.
Worst signing, well, for me, that's got to be Man United's Antony. I see some little clips of him like scoring from a corner in training and it trickling in and all that kind of stuff, and you know, doing his little tricks, and then he came to the Premier League and I just thought,
scored in that first match against you lot, and
he did, and that was the thing, and I think like it was just one of them. We just had that day where I was just like, okay, right, so he scored now, has he? Scored on his debut. But as the season went on, he just wasn't doing anything. So I mean, I'll be interested for Man United fans to see what they say. They'll probably say a lot different to I.
Well, I speak to a Man United fan regularly, Sani, and actually he would probably echo what you've said there.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the thing is this, yeah. Sometimes when a player comes in and has a really good season, you go, they could get found out in their second season a little bit because everyone's clocked onto what they do.
Yeah.
Well, if you ain't clocked onto what Anthony does, I don't know what the fuck you're watching. He's gonna open up and shoot with his left foot to the far corner.
Yeah.
So I think he needs to develop his game and adapt his game. That being said, I think for the most part, Ten Hag's a pretty good manager to work with him on that. So
yeah, exactly. I think he will do. And as I say, kind of maybe slight parallels to when Ronaldo started.
Yeah.
Loads of step overs, flicks and tricks, no end product. He just needs to refine his games as to know when to do it and how to do it. Because going from the Dutch league to Premier League, it's like night and day.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's you can't do them kind of things. So
can I tell you though, you are wrong on worst signing. It was very obvious worst signing, very clear cut, obvious. Listen, Anthony scored a few goals in the Premier. He scored in his debut. He scored in the Europa League a couple of times, and he showed moments where he was all right, you know. Like, and I'm just telling you now, the worst signing by a country mile is Mark Cucurella. That he's diabolical, mate. Listen, I'm shit at football. Yeah, I admit that. Yeah. I can happily admit it because I'm all right at boxing. I'm shit at football, but I reckon I could do a job over Mark Cucurella, man. He's really bad. He's really bad.
Oh, well, look, mate. I mean, you watch Chelsea more than I do. I mean, the only game that stands out to me is when we played you lot at Stamford Bridge, and that was the big Aubameyang, I'm back, I'm sorry, and all that shit. And I instantly had a hatred for the man. While he was at Brighton, didn't really know too much about him. I'd see the odd game and think, yeah, he's all right.
And everyone has a feel-good factor about Brighton, so you don't really hate on the Brighton player.
But then, you know, plays against us, and he was just fucking annoying. Not only for the sideshow bob hair, David Luiz Mark II, he was just an absolute shithouse.
But if it kicks off on a night out, David Luiz probably stands there with you.
Yeah,
Cucurella runs a fucking mile.
Yeah.
You said Aubameyang, he's got to be up there. The only thing you would say about worst signing with Aubameyang is possibly you could go, yeah, but I don't think any other manager would have got much different out of Cucurella in that Chelsea team. Whereas you could go, yeah, but if Thomas Tuchel had stayed, maybe Aubameyang wouldn't have been as bad a signing, because actually when he came in, scored a couple of goals and whatnot. I was actually there against AC Milan. We played pretty well and scored a goal or two. So.
I think the whole Aubameyang thing now, I mean, he's finished. He'll probably sort of maybe disappear back to Germany or something, or you know, maybe a French league player. I don't know. But as for a top club wanting him, the last 3 seasons you've not seen anything decent from him. 2-3 seasons, but he's just not the same player he was. So there's clearly something there attitude wise about the guy. It's happened at pretty much every club he's been at, which then obviously has a knock-on effect with how you perform on the pitch. But yeah, Aubameyang, he was never going to be a good signing anyway. So
most underrated player.
Underrated. Ooh.
I'll tell you where I've gone for this one. I've gone with Callum Wilson, because Callum Wilson, I don't think he was like massively underrated, as in like he's came from nowhere sort of thing. But I think the thing we've always thought about Callum Wilson is injury prone. You know. Also, I think as well, we wouldn't have expected maybe Callum Wilson to get into that England squad. I think you'd have maybe expected the likes of Ollie Watkins and Ivan Toney to get in there ahead of him, barring a betting scandal and whatnot. Callum Wilson, 18 goals and 5 assists, yeah? And if you look at the amount of matches he's played in, it looks very good, but it's not phenomenal, yeah? You know, what's that, 23 goal involvements, yeah? It's not phenomenal, okay? But then you remember the fact that he has had his injury problems.
Yeah.
And you look at how many starts he made. 21 starts. 18 goals, 5 assists, 23 goal involvements in 21 starts. I think that would go down as an underrated player. I think that's a player we look at and probably think, you know, whatever, you've done really well, you've done well in a good side. But I think that actually maybe we need to look at that a little bit more and go, mate, when you've been there on the pitch, you've been pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you put reeling off stats like that, I mean, his contribution listen, I mean, Newcastle are a different outfit when he plays. I mean, he's a very good player. I've always rated him. Injuries, it always seems to be with like the ones you really like the most. As a neutral fan as well, you kind of like, oh, really like him. Really, you hope they stay fit. And then when they're constantly getting injured, just like, what could have been? But again, when he comes in, does the business. So yeah, definitely agree with you on that shout. I mean, probably, even though it might sound a bit silly when I'm saying it, but as you was talking, I was thinking again, underrated. Ivan Toney, yeah, he got an England call up. Kind of know the reason why now he didn't play, but I think scoring the amount of goals and being involved in the amount of goals he has done in what's deemed a small side, who've come straight up from the Championship, who are expected to go straight back down.
Yep.
And they've stayed in and around, like, you know, mid-table, going up a little bit now. There's progression under the manager.
And then when they didn't go back down, a lot of people were going, possible second season syndrome.
Exactly.
So they were tipped to go down the first year and tipped to go down the second year.
Yeah.
And for him to then go on and become the second top English goal scorer in that league.
And exactly. So if anything, his game got better. Do you know what I mean? He improved. So it's kind of like, but again, people don't seem to mention him. But there was another name you mentioned in there as well, Ollie Watkins. I mean, all three of those guys.
Yeah.
Really, if you were stuck and you needed someone, you know you could rely on all three of those.
Yeah, Ollie Watkins, good shout. A little bit of a similar one here. Surprise package. So a player that potentially has played in a way, played in a position, done something this season that took you by surprise. It can be for good or for bad.
Surprise package. I mean, the only one that's going to spring to mind for me at the minute is Ben White, because when he was signed for us, it's supposed to be purely and simply centre half. That was his job. But to then see him almost essentially play as like a right wing back.
Yeah.
That for me, I was like, do you know what? He can actually get forward. And it wasn't just him getting forward to make up the numbers. He was getting involved in stuff.
Yeah.
Guy can cross. He can finish. Do you know what I'm saying? So it was like, where's that come from?
Because you could say the same about Dan Burn playing out of position at left back.
100%, 100%.
But then what I would sort of lean towards your argument there with Ben White is in the final third and definitely progressing through midfield, he became more important. Whereas Dan Burn done a brilliant job at left back.
Yeah.
But you weren't speaking about Dan Burn threading balls into the box or putting players through into very interesting positions, whereas Ben White was doing that.
Yeah. But again, I mean, you know, there's a case for both, because all right, maybe Dan Burn weren't getting forward and threading those passes through, getting those crosses in. But if you look at the sheer physicality of the man, and you're asking him to get up and down on that left side against fast, pacey wingers, do you know what I'm saying? For a guy of his height and build, you're thinking that man needs to be in my centre of defence. But he wasn't. So he adapted to playing out of position, and I think he did superb, mate. I think it was really good.
Dan Burn, little one before we move on. Do you know he's only got 4 fingers on one of his hands?
No, but I'm now going to keep watching to see.
Watch. At the end of the match, when they clap, watch. Ring finger on one hand. When he was a kid, he tried to climb a fence and fell and tore his finger so bad they had to amputate it. So have a look when he next claps on his right hand or his left hand. Ring finger's missing. He's only got 4 fingers on one hand. However, as much as we spoke about all of that,
Frankie 4 fingers, Doug.
We spoke about all of that, and we spoke about players changing position. That's why they took us by surprise. I wouldn't go with either of them. And I know we're talking about the Premier League, and one of the points I'm going to make here relates to the Champions League, but he did do it in the Premier League. John Stones. John Stones has played 5 different positions this season. He's played both sides of centre-back. He's played right-back. He's played centre defensive midfield. And in the Champions League final, he played as an 8. And an interesting fact about that, 6 out of 6 dribbles completed in a Champions League final is the most in 8 years since Messi done it. That's ridiculous.
That is crazy.
Where do you think he plays going forward? Does he go back to that centre-back role and it's just like, look, I deputised you there, it worked out well, whatever? Or are we now seeing, like, you know, we spoke about like Declan Rice earlier. He started off as a centre-back in that West Ham team, progressed up the pitch, and now we're going about Declan Rice, right, need to start scoring more goals, which, to be fair, towards the back end of last season, he started putting a few in the net. Are we going to start looking at John Stones in that way?
Potentially. I think, again, this probably comes down to the coaching aspect of it. I think if you can get like 5 or 6 core players to play well in, you know, 2 or 3 different positions, you're onto a winner, because you're never going to be short again. You're never going to have to spend major money if, like, you know, if someone gets injured in the City midfield, and you could say John Stones, well, there you go, he's playing there. Do you know what I'm saying? So I mean, look at James Milner. I mean, you know, Mr. Versatile. He's literally played everywhere, that guy. Yep. And you know that wherever you put him, you could even put him up top, and he'd do an half decent job. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think that's probably where we're looking. I think where they're looking to progress now with players is, all right, we don't actually have a defined position for you. You can just play anywhere. Whereas there are some players that just can't make that adaptation. They have to stay, well, you know, I'm used to playing right back, I'm going to stay here, kind of thing. So, but John Stones, I mean, just, you know, watching that back, he was outstanding.
Yeah, very good.
But he was always touted as one of those ball-playing centre-halves. Well, he can play out from the back. The man can dribble. He can do that. So you knew he had that in his game anyway. But I think the way that he was set up in matches, I mean, he didn't really do it much, I guess, because the coaches at the time were saying, no, don't do that. But you can see now that he's playing with that freedom. I mean, the guys...
It weren't just that final either. I remember against Real Madrid at the Etihad, he was doing a bit like that. So
yeah.
Very good man.
Very skillful player.
Best manager in the Premier League this season. I'll give you my 2 who I would either go, I'd say it's very close between Unai Emery and Eddie Howe. I think the reason you might not pick Unai Emery is because the fact that he didn't have as long to prove he was the best manager in the league this season. Listen, again, it's like the Haaland thing. It's very easy to just go Pep. But do we want to do that? You know, do we want to go for someone that has really surprised us in what they've done? Arteta's very unfortunate. At the start of the season, say for example, Arsenal had a dip mid-season rather than at the end of the season, then finish strong, you'd maybe be looking at Arteta for this. But for me, Emery or Eddie Howe, because of the time he had to do the job and because he is way ahead of schedule in my estimations, I'm going to go Eddie Howe with that. Who would you go for best manager?
Well, I mean, those 2 you've mentioned were definitely like top of my list. I've always liked Eddie Howe. Always thought he was, you know, decent, and I always said that he just needed a club with a bit of cash to, you know, fund him and what he did, and like they're reaping the rewards now. Yeah, all right, he got relegated with Bournemouth, but Bournemouth were on a, you know, sinking ship at the time anyway. No one's going to go to Bournemouth, no big name signings, but I think what he's done is, you can see that's his team, and I think, you know, everyone expected him to get sacked just because the new owners come in, but they've stuck with him. This next season might be the one where, you know, they suddenly turn, but I hope it isn't. He's a good coach, and I think he's brilliant. So, you know, long may it continue. Unai Emery didn't do too well at Arsenal. Kind of went out on a whimper, really. But look, good to see the man coming back, and what he's done at Villa, turn it around after the mess Steven Gerrard left it in. It's been nothing short of phenomenal. Me personally, I'm going to go for the Brighton manager, De Zerbi.
Yeah.
I just think as he come in, you know, Graham Potter left beginning of the season, and it's like, well, what did Brighton do? They moved quick, they found their man. No one knew who the hell he was, but as an Arsenal fan, you know, didn't know Arsene who, and he came in. Do you know what I mean? But this De Zerbi's come in, and he's done amazing to give Brighton European football.
Yeah,
just, you know, the highest place finished. It's stuff for dreams. Do you know what I mean?
I didn't know who he was either.
I didn't.
And then when I look back on it and think, mate, he managed Shakhtar against Real Madrid in the Champions League last season. Like, how did I not know who he was? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's the thing, because you don't. Because our focus is always going to be on Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich.
The star.
You don't really give a shit about Shakhtar the next or whoever. You don't care, because you're not really paying attention, because those games always go the way they normally go, with those big teams winning.
That moves me on nicely to the worst manager of this Premier League season. Who are you going with?
Oh, mate. To be fair, it's single-handedly, for me, got to go to Frank Lampard. The man almost relegated 2 clubs in one season.
That's a half-full mentality, mate. he played a pivotal part in saving both Everton and Chelsea from relegation this season.
Mate, he's... I mean, I think when we spoke before, his record, like, you know, Everton and then Chelsea, and you were rocking up in double figures, like, since he last tasted a win. And unfortunately, this serves as like a highlight of not all great players become great managers.
No, Gerrard and Lampard both this season.
Both the most talented midfielders of our generations, do you know what I mean? can't manage for shit. And it's like, you know, it really is that. Sometimes you can't just go on a name. And I do think there's this sort of like carousel of, you know, everyone just goes round the motions. It's like, all right, Sam Allardyce 1 week on, and he ends up at another club in the Premier. They all seem to just sort of stick to the same pool of managers. Nobody goes out there and goes, you know what, I'm having him. Like Brighton, for example, they've just gone and got De Zerbi. No one would have touched De Zerbi in the, you know, the top 6. But yeah, Frank Lampard for me, I just think he hasn't shown in any of his managerial career to date that he can progress players and bring them on. I think he's just one of them, sticks them out there and then hopes that his championship winning mentality that he had at Chelsea gets them through. And I just don't think he's that good a coach.
Top flight managerial career or overall? Because
Overall.
I would argue at Derby, Tomori done a good job, Mount done a good job, but then you could say they were
coached at Chelsea, so they're playing in a certain way. He's got them in because he knew they were good, and he had the link with Chelsea.
Listen, I'd go Brendan Rodgers personally. 25 points out of a possible 84. Were Leicester going to win 84 points? No, I don't even know if they won the league on 84 points. I think it's 82, but you had a possible 84 points there. You got 25. You were managing a squad that was deemed too good to go down, and not only that, you were managing a squad of proven winners. I ain't saying proven Premier League winners, but that team, all of them have won an FA Cup and all of them have won a Community Shield, more or less. Lost Kasper Schmeichel. There might have been stuff with the board. I know they were hit badly by the pandemic because the board are in that sort of leisure and tourism type industry. But Brendan Rodgers, man, that was a bad one.
Yeah, I mean, that was stuff I've heard about him over the years from sort of like ex-players that have played under him. You know, he's not sort of probably, I would say, the most likeable character, maybe. Bit up his own arse. But
what was the thing? Didn't he go?
Oh yeah, so one of the stories that was on this show I was watching, and I think it was when he was managing at Swansea, and this player. One of their strikers got injured, and this player who's been sort of on the bench for ages, he was like, right, Gaffer, you know, I mean, you haven't got a striker. I've been banging him in the reserves, you know. And he's in the office and he's having this like proper serious chat with Brendan Rodgers, who's just sitting there on his chair, his folding chair. And he's gone, so, you know, I need to play, Gaffer. And then Brendan Rodgers just looking at him, and he's gone like that. And he's like, well, what are you doing? And he's like, and he's looked at his belt, and he's just pointed at his belt, and he's sitting, and he's gone, that's Gucci, that is. And he's gone, right.
Fair fucking play.
Do you know what I mean?
Fair
it's like
play.
He's that was the story, and at first I had to like rewind it and say, no, that's bullshit. I didn't just hear that. But then
the actual player said this on a podcast?
Yeah, the actual player, and he said it, and I just thought, nah, I mean, you can't. And then, you know, but I think
that's
other players,
David Brent style, isn't it?
That's been the vibe that other people have
done the thing, didn't he, the Being Liverpool documentary?
Yes.
When he went, there's 3 names in this letter that are going to let me down or whatever. In this envelope, 3 names that are going to let me down. And it's like, fuck off. You know what I mean? Like,
so there you go. So there's that. But I mean, for him, I think, you know, the reason why I mentioned the character, I think is important. When you're winning, you can kind of let some of that shit slide.
Yeah.
And you can just go, do you know what? As a group of players, Gaffer's a fucking div, but we're doing well. Let's just keep going. When that starts to go wrong, you all start collectively thinking, right, this guy, you know, he's doing my nutting.
And you clock on in the interviews, it goes from we and us to they and them.
Yeah.
And it's like, so you're distancing yourself from it now and whatever.
That's it. So I think, and especially, I mean, Leicester, that's a mad one. Winning the Premier League, like, you know, 7 years ago, and, you know, winning an FA Cup. And you think, you know, this team, they shouldn't be going down. But
no way.
No one's too good to go down.
Best game?
This is an easy one for me, just because of like the limbs aspect of it. I was with my kids, and they got involved with it as well. And even though we weren't at the stadium, it was just something else. It was the Arsenal Bournemouth game where, as you know, we're sort of 2-0 down to Bournemouth. It was struggling. And you're thinking, right, you know, we haven't lost a game in God knows how long. And it's like, we can't be losing to these. So obviously got the radio on, and then it's like, you know, 2-0. I'm sort of kicking off. I'm like, fucking this, fucking that. And the kids are kind of like got this blind faith. Don't worry, Dad. Don't worry. And then obviously the first one goes back in, and I'm back in the game. I'm like, right, okay, here we go. And then the second one, and then the third one, we're all jumping around my living room. It was just like mental. And then obviously they put the little clips up on Sky Sports, didn't they? So that was instantly up. I must have watched it about 10 times in the space of like 15, 5 minutes.
As any true fan would.
Yeah, but like even in the end, like Teddy's like, Dad, come on, man, give it a rest. I'm like, no, I just got to watch it again. Just that last bit when Reece Nelson clarts it in and everyone's like, "Whoa." It was just, for me, it was just brilliant. And it was just, as an Arsenal fan, we've not had many of them over the years. So just to be involved in a game like that, and then again, the whole crowd, you could feel the vibe, the energy. It's just completely different to how I remember when I first was going down there. So for me, it was just like, oh, what a game. Roller coaster of emotions. I'm just like, sat down, give me a beer.
Yeah. Another.
Yeah, another one.
Do you know what? I was going to say the 3-3 draw between Newcastle and Man City. And again, I speak about recency bias. And I think because it was so early on in the season, we don't really maybe think of it for what it was. But hearing that explanation, I'll give that one to you. It's got to be that 3-2 win.
I personally think Newcastle should have won that, by the way, the Oil Classico.
Let's move on to most significant moment. I'll start. Saka's penalty miss. I don't want to go in on him for it. It happens. It really does happen. It's like a boxer getting knocked out, yeah? You have enough fights, you get chinned at some point, you take and score enough penalties, you'll miss one at some point. But I think the way that the season was going and the fact that... What would that penalty have put you 3 up?
Would have been 3-1 up.
3-1 up, yeah. Game's dead and buried.
Yeah,
you go into the Southampton game with less trepidation type thing. And I think at that point you go on to win the league. Because I always said you could draw the Liverpool game and lose the City game. But if you beat... Statistically, look, maybe that's not how it ended up. But the way I saw it was that if you beat West Ham, you beat Southampton, I can pretty much guarantee you would have beat Nottingham Forest.
Yeah.
And then the league's yours, mate. So I think that's the most significant moment. What do you think?
I think from I mean, I was fully invested this season. And I think at that point, as I've said to you sort of on this podcast and privately as well, that was the game I came away from thinking, do you know what? Like, I don't think I've ever felt as low. Like, all the highs that we've been experiencing, I came away from that and I just thought, yeah, we fucked it. In my head, I just thought there's no way back. Because then you're kind of like begging from other teams, like, oh, please get us a win. Please stop City, get a draw. And it just, the way that they started to really turn it on, it was just never going to happen. And then obviously, I think the way that we just pulled our pants down at City, I mean, that was just scandalous. We just played proper shit. Showed that Rob Holding shouldn't really be in there. Should have done better. But yeah, I would have to say the Saka miss, because as we were just saying, he scores that 3-1 up, game's done, renewed confidence. Then we beat Southampton, and we go on. And I think even then, I think we still get, probably a little bit closer to City in their game. But all the others, I mean, we should have even beaten Liverpool. Yeah, I mean, that's one that we should have done. But yeah, definitely agree. The West Ham one was just, it's just giving me fucking PTSD now thinking about it, mate. I feel all depressed now.
What about mug of the season?
Oh God, mug of
You're going to upset someone here, aren't we?
Oh,
my ones I would initially go with Yerry Mina. I mean, I know it wasn't this season, but do you remember the thing when he gets in Havertz's face and then Havertz he tries to do that to Havertz and Havertz goes, off or whatever, he goes down, like whatever. That wasn't actually this season, but he's always at it, isn't he? Like on the last day he was at it as well. He's telling Pickford to go down after he saved the corner and whatever. Pretty the sort of player when he's playing for your club you love, but for everyone else.
Yeah. Because it's like that's what you want. You want to see your players wind up the opposition.
Allardyce. A lot of people say, that was a tactical thing of taking the pressure off of the players.
Yeah.
But I mean, you came in and picked up 1 point and you were abysmal and you said, Pep, Klopp, I'm right there with them.
Oh no, he's a genius, mate. I pocketed 500 grand.
Romero for pulling Cucurella's hair. Cucurella for having that silly hair to pull. The VAR and the referee team for not clocking it and giving us a penalty. Yeah, they're all in there.
I think, they're all in there. I mean, obviously, my mate Bruno Fernandes just the dirtiest cheat I've ever seen. And like the minute you see him, it's just you just bristle. He's just a fucking rat, mate.
Wouldn't trust him on a stag do, would you? If you had a missus.
I wouldn't fucking
And again,
trust him with a piece of cheese, mate.
I'm a big John Terry fan, so I can't say anything.
There's levels, mate. There's levels. Now, I think on a serious point, I think we could probably pick out and single out players, but there was something you just said there that's made me think of this. When the players are going down and they're play acting and they're doing all that stuff, VAR, I think, comes out as the biggest mug because they're still fucking the enjoyment for the game by just getting basic calls wrong. They're being used inconsistently throughout the season. There's no, you know, and with the VAR, I include the referees in that as well, because some of the officiating is beyond piss poor. We're getting to a point now where it's like you can't even celebrate a goal that's just been scored because someone's toenail might be just over this line.
Yep.
And these lines get drawn any way which way they want, to be fair, because against our Arsenal Man City, we got a goal that was, I think it was either they scored and it was offside, but the way the lines got drawn, it's a goal. And it's things like that. And
Brighton Spurs, that was a big one.
Yeah, but I mean Brighton, that for me was nothing short of a fucking robbery, that was. And I think looking at all of that, it does start to beg the question, like, are brown envelopes being handed around here? Because these are so clear-cut and obvious that when you watch them back on the telly and then they go, oh no, he's not giving anything. And you're thinking, he's just fucking taking the geezer out in the box.
Ultimately, Brighton finished far enough away from Champions League football that wasn't going to affect it. And Spurs weren't even in really with a shout at European football after,
Yeah, no, I agree.
after that game. But if that had been a significant event, say, for example, Spurs were leapfrogging Brighton in the league and then they got European football instead of Brighton,
yeah,
that'd have gone down badly. I think to the Havertz penalty, outside the Premier League, but in the Champions League, and, maybe as a Chelsea fan, I should just keep quiet on this, but that Havertz penalty I even think about, and I think, it's just like 10
so
years
blatant.
ago, there's no way he's retaking that penalty. It's not Jersey Dudek Champions League final, is it? Like, the goalkeeper's a tiny bit off his line. Like,
yeah, and this is the thing. There's no consistency anywhere, and what it's doing is it's slowly killing the game because people are watching it and just thinking this is foolishness. And a game that you rated as one of the best games. Newcastle Man City. I think that was the game where I think Rodri should have been sent off. Clearly. I'm sitting there. I don't need VAR to tell me that's the second yellow. He should be gone, but he isn't. They review it, and it's like, how many times do you want to watch it? I can see from one replay, he's got to go.
The Tottenham-Chelsea game, there should have been a sending off in the build-up to the Spurs goal that equalised. Obviously, not even the Cucurella thing.
Yeah.
The goal that equalised, there should have been a sending off in that. There didn't.
Yeah.
And then you look, it's a bit like thinking deep into it, but you think, like the landscape of how things went. We win that game. Tuchel might have stayed.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, all right, maybe we would have finished fifth. Maybe we wouldn't have got top four. Tuchel stays, we don't finish bottom half of the table. No way. So we're rating VAR as the biggest mug of the season.
Biggest mug of the season, mate. Has to be.
Fair enough. Right, people, that is our end of season awards. But I would like to know, what ones would you change? Let me know in the comments. As soon as this video drops, I will be live in the comments replying to every single one of you, so let me know.